Well, I don't know about you guys, but I love that. And we get to celebrate 2 more baptisms here at the end of the service as well. And so thank you all so much for showing up here today. My name is Corey. Welcome to Envoy, where we are a people following Jesus. To those not yet, it's good to be with you guys here today. We're actually starting a new series today called Insecure. All right, Insecure is what we're going to be talking about. And this is a little bit of a play on words. What we're going to be taking a look at is a bunch of different things that we actually find security in this life that actually God wants us maybe to look at a little bit differently. And if we have kind of a right perspective on that, we can actually operate like in security of what God actually tells us. And so we'll be taking a look at things like national security or national insecurity, social insecurity, financial, cyber, eternal security. But today we're actually going to be taking a look at the one that probably comes up to our minds and our thoughts the quickest when we think about security, and that's personal security. And so in a world that is so uncertain, untrustworthy, unpredictable, unstable, how do we find security in this life? And our hope is that over the next several weeks and through our conversations, that you'll be able to actually be able to navigate some of these things and what God says so that we can find our security in the right things. Now, personal security is what we're talking about today. We have all sorts of stuff that we employ in order to be able to help us feel safe, right? Things like Ring doorbells, alarm systems, locks, notifications and alerts, fences and gates, trackers, bodyguards, weapons, self-defense training, baby monitors, all these kind of things that we do in order to be able to keep us safe. Although sometimes these monitors actually work in the inverse, don't they? I don't know if you guys have baby monitors or not, but when we had video baby monitors, it actually made me more anxious about the thing because I'm sitting there looking at my kid crying and not being able to do anything. And then when they stop crying, then I wonder what's wrong with them. And so I'm looking at the monitor the whole time. So I'm not sure if that actually works or not, but regardless, the point is we employ all kinds of things to help us feel personally secure. But what can protect us from our own thoughts of insecurities in regards to who we think we are? All sorts of things physically to be able to help us feel safe and secure, but what can keep us from actually the insecure thoughts that we have about ourselves? Now, a little secret to share with you all this morning, if you don't already know this, everybody is more insecure than what they let on. We all are. All of us are more insecure than we'd like to admit or that we would rather allow other people to know about us. Whatever someone sees on the outside is a mere glimpse of what we're actually battling on the inside. As a matter of fact, I want you to turn to your neighbor right now and tell them, you're insecure. Go ahead and do that right now. Okay? Don't be harsh, all right? Don't make them feel more insecure than what they already are. But you see, we do our best not to let our cracks show. We try to remain confident, but deep down, if we're being honest with ourselves, we are fractured, and we're doing the very best we can to keep the pieces of our life together. And if someone happens to catch a glimpse of our insecurity, we shout back at them, I'm not insecure, you're insecure, right? That's how we operate. That ought to keep them at bay. And one of the things that I've come to the conclusion of in my own life is that I'm confident that I'm insecure, all right? I'm confident that I'm insecure, and to be honest with you, I was unaware of just how insecure I actually am and was and continue to battle about that until you start to do a little bit of introspection, until you start to realize some of the motivation behind the reason why we do certain things, before you start to examine some of our fears and anxieties and what they're actually rooted in. And for many of you guys, you all might see me and I might appear confident on the outside, but really, I, like many of you or most of you, are just searching for, reaching for, grasping for something to hold on to so that I can be secure in myself. You see, insecurity causes all sorts of things in our life. It's the reason why we brag and boast. It's why we won't try new things. It's why we stay in the familiar. It's why we settle for meh and we live in the mediocre. It's why we're critical of others. It's why we're overly competitive. It's why we won't let others help. It's why we can't celebrate other people's successes. It's why we don't show emotion. It's why we compromise our character and do things that we wouldn't normally do. It's why we have and demonstrate prejudice towards others. It's why we wear makeup or spend more than we should on the attire that we have in order to make us feel better. Just so you all know, I don't wear makeup, all right? But that just is an issue, right? We don't like to put ourselves out there or to be rejected or to fail. Why? Because it only reinforces the lie that we believe. And here the lie is that we're not enough. That's it. We're not enough. And that's what breeds the insecurities in us and causes us to react and respond in all of these ways we've talked about. Insecurity is killing me. Not with noise, but with whispers. It doesn't kick down doors. It slips through the cracks and lives rent-free in my mind. It makes mirrors into enemies and silence into verdicts. It turns every pause in conversation into proof that I am insufficient. Insecurity is killing me with two words: not enough. Not strong enough. Not smart enough. Not spiritual enough. Not steady enough. Not enough to be chosen. Not enough to be kept. Not enough to be remembered. I hear it in comparisons. They seem complete. I seem conditional. I become more and feel less because insecurity is not impressed. It moves the finish line every time. Someone like me is always almost, but never enough. Insecurity is killing me, slowly, precisely, mercilessly. It leaves me breathing but not alive. It teaches me to hesitate, to hold back, to apologize for taking up space, for trying at all. It follows me everywhere like a shadow that edits the light. And the cruelest part is, it wears my voice. It sounds like truth. We, all of us, are more insecure than we would want other people to know. We have to be reminded of what Craig Groeschel said in Winning the War of Your Minds. He says, remember, a lie believed as truth will affect your life as if it were true. And this is why we must address this issue of personal insecurity in order to be able to combat the lies and to correct the truth so that we might be able to live fully in the identity and the calling that God has made us for. Amen? So we're going to have a conversation about this, and thankfully, we're not the only ones that are insecure. As a matter of fact, the scripture is actually full of illustrations and people and characters that have some insecurities, and today we're actually going to be taking a look at one of them, a guy by the name of Gideon. And so if you got your Bibles, go ahead and open them up, turn them on to Judges chapter 6, and we're going to kind of walk through Gideon's story today as a way to be able to help us navigate our own insecurities. Now, we're going to get to the beginning of Gideon's story, but I want to skip to the end of it because I want to help you guys to see like all of what Gideon did, and then we'll kind of go back to where we find him at the first of his story. But Gideon was a pretty amazing character, all right? He did some amazing things. In his hometown, in his city, they had these altars to these other gods, and nobody wanted to deal with them about that. But Gideon, he went and he tore them down. He tore down the altar to Baal, tore down the Asherah poles. His dad didn't really know what was going on, didn't really want him to do that. The whole community wanted to kill him, but he did it anyway. Then he becomes a judge of Israel, and he amasses an army of over 22,000 men to go fight against the Midianites that have been oppressing them at this time. Now, through some conversations with God, Gideon ends up whittling down this 22,000 people down to 10,000 at first, and then eventually down to 300. And then what he does is he takes those 300 men and he goes and slays 120,000 of the enemy allied camp. All right, amazing. Forget Sparta. Gideon was the original 300. All right, like he took the 300 and killed all these guys, and then on top of that, he goes back to teach his own people a lesson for mocking him in the process, and then rejects their desire to be able to make him a ruler over them and says, no, the Lord is actually ruler over you. And this is truly a miraculous story. Gideon does some incredible, remarkable things. But that's not how the story of Gideon begins. Let's go back to chapter 6 and verse 11. We turn and we find Gideon. We find him beginning actually at the bottom of a wine press in fear of the Midianites that kept coming and raiding his land and his people. In verse 11, it says this: Then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash, the clan of Abiezer. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. Now, we don't live in an agrarian society, but I think we probably get the idea that you don't typically thresh wheat in a wine press. They're two separate things. As a matter of fact, wine presses were typically in low places with high humidity and things of that nature for making wine. If you were threshing wheat, you typically did it on a hill, right, out in the open, so that all of the chaff would blow away and the wheat would fall down. And so Gideon, though, is not up on top of an open hill where he can be seen. He's down in the midst of a wine press because the enemy, the Midianites, had been taking over. They'd been coming and raiding for food. They'd been decimating the people of Israel. And so here's where we find the beginning of Gideon's story, scared and fearful, just getting by, not trying to make a name for himself, not having great aspirations. He's simply in survival mode, making wheat in a wine press. And the angel of the Lord appears to him. In verse 12 it says, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, mighty hero, the Lord is with you. Now, I want you to take a look at how he addresses Gideon, who's hiding in fear. What does he say about Gideon? What does he make the statement? What does he call him? Mighty hero. Another translation says mighty warrior. Now at this point, Gideon hasn't done anything deserving this moniker. As a matter of fact, the only thing that we've seen so far is that he's scared, afraid, skeptical, and insecure. Yet God calls him up and into his true identity. But the question is whether or not Gideon's actually going to be able to hear that. Is he going to be able to understand and know who he is to God? You see, our insecurities keep us from our true identity. Personal insecurity grows when we root our identity in unstable things like our circumstances, our skills, our appearance, our abilities. But security comes when our identity is anchored in what God says about us. A few weeks ago in that series, Delight, that we were talking about, we actually had a conversation about how God sees us and the fact that what you think about God, and for that matter, what you think about yourself, is actually not as important as what God thinks about you. And you know what God tells us about us? He delights in us. He loves us. He cares about us. He treasures us. He sees every tear that we cry. He's always there with us. He calls us wonderful things like son and daughter. He invites us into the family. God has so many amazing things to say about us. But will we take those on as our own identity? Will we be able to hear those things, or will the insecurities in our life drown those things out? You see, the greatest limitation on your life is often not your ability or lack thereof. It's your identity and whether or not you're going to step into that. Because when you are unsure of your identity, then it's really easy to fall into our insecurities. Now, any of you guys been watching the Olympics here the last couple weeks? Yeah, I heard some good news this morning. I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, all right? But go USA. Woo! All right. Yeah, we'll leave it there. All right, so anyway, but like good stuff, like Olympics are fun. It's amazing. You watch these athletes and it's so incredible to watch these people. They are just amazing at their crafts. As a matter of fact, I think it should be mandatory for anybody who's watching the Winter Olympics to go ice skating before they actually watch the Olympics, all right? Because it's really easy to sit in your chair and judge all of their mistakes and they quarter rotated on that one. They needed to figure that out. And until you go try to just stand up on the ice yourself, right? It's amazing. These people are the best of the best. But if you watch closely, you can actually see something about these individual athletes. You watch them and you can tell which ones are actually completely secure in themselves and which ones are actually insecure, and their security actually comes from their abilities. It comes from their successes. Because you'll watch these people that have spent years trying to perfect their craft, and then they fall or they fail or they don't get the medal, and all of a sudden, like, they are completely devastated. They don't even know who they are because they didn't win what they expected to win, and they're completely devastated. And I get it. Like, I would be incredibly disappointed in that. But some of these guys just fall apart because their identity is wrapped up into their achievement. However, there was one person that caught my attention just this past week, a person named Alyssa Liu. I don't know if you guys saw her or heard her story. Amazing athlete, figure skater, doing all that kind of stuff, whatever. Had a lot of success early on, but then kind of lost who she was and decided to retire at the ripe old age of 16. And and decided to take a break from skating like she was done because it was just so pressing on her. The anxiety was filled. She didn't know who she was. And she had to take a break. She stepped away from it a while, and ultimately she was able to kind of find herself, if you will, and she came back to skating, not so that she could achieve something, not so that she could win a medal, but because of the enjoyment of it. And I don't know how many of you guys actually got to watch her skate or saw that afterwards. There was a notable difference in watching her skate than anybody else. Everybody else is tense and they're trying to get medal and all that kind of stuff, and she's just out there just enjoying it. She's just flipping around and she's doing her thing. And ultimately, because she was confident in who she was and it didn't matter whether or not she medaled, she ended up getting the gold. It was crazy, right? But like there's a notable difference whenever we understand what our identity is when circumstances come our way, whether we'll fall apart or whether we'll fall hard onto who God says that we are. The story continues on after God has revealed to Gideon what his identity is. Gideon responds in a way that we probably actually can relate to. It says, "Sir," Gideon replied, "if the Lord is with us, why has all of this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites." Now, guys, I have no doubt that things were really difficult. Things were really glim. Things were really difficult. It was a bad time to be an Israelite. It was a bad time to be Gideon. It must have seemed like a long time coming. The people are starving and other nations are winning. But finally, a word from the Lord comes. But do you see how it's received? Not with joy and expectancy. It's received with skepticism and cynicism. As a matter of fact, Gideon completely ignores the identity statement that the Lord is trying to bring to him because he's so caught up in the situation. See, insecurity causes us only to see the situation in front of us, and it oftentimes causes us to deflect responsibility and to blame other people. Not to take responsibility for the situation that we happen to be in, but to be able to see the situation and then to blame others for what's actually happening. Some of you guys might remember the Milli Vanilli song, "Blame It on the Rain." Anybody remember that one? I'm dating myself a little bit. Y'all remember, "Blame it on the rain, yeah, yeah." Y'all, come on. "Blame it on the stars that shine at night. But whatever you do, don't put the blame on you." Y'all remember that, right? Okay. If you don't, you're missing out. All right. Go back and look up Milli Vanilli. You're not going to be happy with that. All right. Anyway. I remember as a kid, like singing this song. I didn't know what it was about, but I do now. It's like when you find yourself in a situation that you can't handle on your own, what do? Blame it on anything else, right? Put it on anything else, but don't take it on yourself. And matter of fact, our insecurities, they do this. They do this because we are so insecure and therefore fragile because of our insecurities that we can't actually take responsibility on ourselves. And so we'll put the blame on anybody else and everybody else that we can, because to actually accept responsibility would only feed our insecurity and make the situation more unbearable. So we oftentimes blame others to disperse our insecurity. As a matter of fact, that probably is a pretty good litmus test for things that are going on in our mind. The moment that you start feeling yourself blaming others and pointing the fingers, it should probably be an indication that you got something else going on inside of you that you need to deal with. Probably an insecurity that's causing you to actually put this thing on somebody else. But that's exactly what Gideon does. He blames God for their predicament. He's not taking responsibility for where they're at, and he accuses him of abandoning them. But that doesn't stop what God has for him. In verse 14, it says this: "Then the Lord turned to him and said, go with strength. Go with the strength that you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites, for I am sending you." Do you see what happens here? I love this. God flips the scenario back on Gideon and he says, I have showed up. I am doing something. I'm sending you. And I absolutely love when God does this to other people. Right? I don't particularly like it when he does that to me. Have you ever been there? You all know what I'm talking about? You notice a need, you see an issue, you uncover a gap that needs filling, and you say to yourself, or maybe even out loud, someone really ought to do something about this. And then you hear that still small voice, sometimes that very loud, 2x4 up the side of the head, where God goes, I am doing something about this. I created you. I made you. It's for this reason that I revealed this thing to you. You know about that thing. You've seen about that thing because I want you to actually do something about it. I want you to meet that financial need that you just saw. I want you to share your faith with your friend. I want you to invite them in or to invite them over. I want you to be a part of solving this problem. And then we do exactly what Gideon does next. In verse 15 it says, "But Lord," Gideon replied, "how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in the whole tribe of Manasseh, and I am the very least in my entire family." See, Gideon's insecurities flare up in full force at this moment. Drawing on his family background, his social standing, his personal inadequacies, the lack of past successes, all to be able to tell God, "Hey, I think you got the wrong guy." He starts making excuses because of his insecurities, just like you and I do. He minimizes his abilities and maximizes his weakness in order to disqualify himself and diminish his efforts. He's shrinking back instead of stepping up when God calls him out. Insecurity doesn't just affect how we see ourselves, it also affects how we obey God. When we don't know our true identity, then we find it hard to step into our true calling, and we start to see our weaknesses as a barrier for God using us, not knowing that they are actually the gateway for his grace. Paul has something to say about this to the Corinthian church, and he writes in 2 Corinthians, he says, 3 different times I begged the Lord to take it away. He's got this thorn in his side. He's got this insecurity thing that is keeping him from what he believes being all that he can be for God and to do his calling. Yet this is the conclusion he comes to. He says, each time he said, God said, "My grace is all that you need. My power works best in weaknesses." So now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults and hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. You see, it's not our goodness that brings us personal security, but his grace. It's not our goodness, guys. And if we were waiting around for our goodness to actually give us personal security, then we would be waiting around for all of eternity because we never measure up. We always get it wrong. At some extent, we will never be completely righteous and holy and good. It's not our goodness that brings us personal security. It is his grace. And we must hold on to his grace, which means not being afraid to actually put our insecurities on display. One of the reasons why I can sit up here and I can have a conversation about my own insecurities with you guys is because I know that this life is not about me looking good. It's about making God glorious because he is. And the way that we make God glorious is by embracing his grace and by sharing our weaknesses. Otherwise, we have this tendency in our life to be able to cover over the things that we do wrong, the inadequacies that we have in our life. And what ends up happening is people aren't able to see God for all that he is. That's why I so love the baptism videos that we get to do here. People get to share their stories and their backgrounds and their falls and their fallacies and their issues. And you're going to get to hear a couple more here in a little bit. And it's in those moments that we actually see ourselves when we go, oh, if they could do that, if God could do that for them, he can do that for me. I see his grace on full display, which actually means putting our insecurities on display. You see, insufficiency is a reality to be grasped, but insecurity is a disease to be cured. Let me explain that to you. See, it's actually a point of spiritual growth when we come to realize that on our own, we are insufficient. That's actually a good thing for us to come to a conclusion of. I have battled against self-sufficiency for most of my life. I have to continue to push against that. But I've come to realize that dependency on God is the only real way that I end up without deficiency. It's the only way that I actually feel secure in his love. And the paradox of sanctification is that awareness of sin is actually a sign of growth. Awareness of our insufficiency is a sign of growth. The presence of sin itself isn't good, but God uses it for good to make us conscious of our need for him. Insufficiency is actually a necessity for us understanding and embracing grace. However, insecurity is not something that needs to be endured. It's something that needs to be corrected and cured by the remedy called grace. And every time we take hold of God's grace, which is sufficient for us, then we say, not today, insecurity. I know who I am, and I know what God has done for me. Judges 6:16 says this, the Lord said to him, I will be with you, and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man. I love this, and this is where we're going to conclude at today. And there's more to Gideon's story, and I'd encourage you guys to go and read the rest of his story in Judges 7 and in 8. Awesome stuff to be able to take a look at. But this is where we're going to conclude today. Gideon gets done, missing out on the identity and causing some excuses and deflecting responsibility and all of these things. And in the midst of all of these insecurities that Gideon is displaying, the Lord said to him, I will be with you. See, God doesn't try to convince Gideon of his capability. He doesn't tell him, hey, Gideon, you got this. He doesn't argue with him about his heritage and his history and his past. He doesn't even address his personal insecurities. He simply affirms, I, the Lord your God, am with you. And in essence, he tells Gideon, I got you because I'm with you. Interestingly enough, this seems to be the common way that God deals with insecurities all throughout the Bible. It's not just what he does with Gideon. He does this very same thing with Moses. He's called Moses to go back to Egypt and go to Pharaoh and say, let my people go and all that kind of stuff. And you know how Moses responds? It says, but Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people out of Egypt? Guys, this is not some kind of genuine humility. It's not a humble response by Moses. This is insecurity at its finest. Moses is going, I'm just a farmer now. I'm just a shepherd. I'm out here doing stuff. I've been away from the game for 40 years. I tried this once on my own. It didn't work really well. Who am I to go do this thing that you called me to do? And you know what God tells him? I will be with you. Moses says, I can't speak well enough. I can't lead well enough. I will be with you. He does the same thing with Jeremiah. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations, the Lord tells Jeremiah. Jeremiah then responds, O sovereign Lord, I can't speak for you. I'm too young. And the Lord replied, don't say I'm too young, for you must go wherever I send you and say whatever I tell you. And don't be afraid of the people. Why? For I will be with you. Protect you. I, the Lord, have spoken. Jeremiah and his insecurities. I'm not old enough. I'm not experienced enough. The Lord's response to his insecurity, I will be with you. You know, he does this with his disciples, who at the point of his death, burial, and resurrection now are freaking out because Jesus is saying, I'm going to be going. I'm peacing out. I'm leaving, right? And he leaves them with this great commission. He says, teach these new disciples to obey all the commands that I have given you. This is a high task, especially now that Jesus is leaving them, right? But what does he leave them with? And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. You see, this is the way that God deals with our personal insecurities. He deals with our personal insecurities by assuring us that he is with us. In all reality, you and I are not enough on our own. We are insufficient. We do have insecurities, but God is enough, and he is with us, and his grace is enough, and he reminds us that we are enough to him. And that should be enough for us. You know, an interesting happened with the Olympics. Michaela Schifrin, you guys know her, like incredible skier, slalom person. Like people have doted on her as the greatest of all time in her particular sport. Yet, she's one of those people that if you look at over the last couple of Olympics, you watch her kind of prepare, you watch her kind of do this stuff. She's got some great insecurities in her, right? Because she's this Olympics medals have eluded her over the last couple times, and you can see it kind of playing out in the way that she's been affected by this. But this last race that she did, she kind of took a different knack. And I think that there's actually a correlation between this and what we're talking about today. It was kind of amazing. She's doing all this preparation. She's the last one to go. She has a good opportunity to being able to win a medal. And right before her, this girl goes and she misses the very first pole. And all of a sudden, you know that's got to be going through her mind. Like, oh yeah, I gotta go through the first pole, right? I got to do this. But something interesting happened. She talks about this afterwards. She said during this particular race, something spiritual happened. And for all I know, Michaela Schifrin is not particularly spiritual. I don't believe she's particularly Christian for what I know. But what she says is that in this moment, as she starts her race, she began to talk with her dad. Now, if you don't know this about Michaela, she lost her father several years ago and has been doing this kind of ski journey in life on her own. And so in this moment, she kind of just spends time and she calls on her dad and she starts having a conversation with her dad and she skis the course and she does it immaculately, and then all of a sudden she crosses the line and you can actually see her mouth uttering these words as she crosses the finish line. Dad. From the very beginning, for the very end of that race, she has a conversation with her father. And guys, this is a physical representation of something that I think is spiritual, but I think this is the image of how we defeat insecurity in our own life. Our thoughts are not on our ability. Our thoughts are not on the course that we must take, but on the fact that our dad is with us from the very beginning to the very end. So whatever you're going through today, whatever insecurity has got you, it's been speaking to you, it's been tearing you down, it's been causing you hesitancy, it's been causing you to deflect, it's been causing you to blame. I don't know what that happens to be, but we know the solution to our personal insecurities is to acknowledge the identity that God has called us to be able to hold on to the grace that he has given us, and to be able to acknowledge the fact that he is with us every step of the way. Insecurity is killing me. But somewhere, beneath the verdict, beneath the lie, there's another voice that does not say, be more. It says, you do not have to become enough. By grace, you already are. I am with you. And insecurity trembles when I dare to believe it. You know, there's some people today that have come to believe what God says about them to be their highest identity. He's their highest authority. And therefore, that diminishes whatever insecurities that they have today. And we're going to get to witness and celebrate their baptism here in just a moment. But for those of you that are here with us today, and you don't know what God says about you, you don't know that he's called you a son and daughter, you don't know that he's invited you into the family, you've been carrying these insecurities about who you are in this life all through your life, today is a day for you to actually acknowledge that there's a God that loves you, that he sent his one and only son to die for you because you are precious to him. And if you need to come and grab one of these towels of surrender today and acknowledge that your insecurities don't own you anymore, but what God says about you does, then come grab a towel just as these guys did. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to celebrate a couple baptisms. We'll have an opportunity to be able to respond to what God has said about us. So let's celebrate these right now.